Greetings and welcome to another edition of If I Should Die Before I Wake. I'm Father Jim Kirby. On this episode, we're going to go back to Chernihiv in 2022 on the trip I took with Tamara and Alexander Nettlebar as they worked for the Rotary Club in delivering food, supplies, and support to the victims of the invasion in northern Ukraine near the city of Chernihiv. But before we get to that, I'd like to mention a few things about the war in Ukraine. People often ask me if things are getting better there, and the short answer is no. Regardless of what the Kremlin says, Russia is not winning the war. The front lines have not changed much in a year. Russia is enduring tremendous losses in soldiers and equipment at a staggering rate. They average 1,000 casualties a day, sending waves of soldiers in certain slaughter in primitive World War I style tactics. Ukraine is also losing soldiers and equipment, but nothing close to that of the Russians. Ukraine is fighting a defensive battle and have mastered the art of drone warfare in the air, land, and sea. Without a navy, Ukraine has eliminated the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Since Russia is unable to defeat the Ukrainian military, they instead continue their terrorism by deliberately attacking civilians non-stop. The so-called negotiations with Putin are simply a tactic to prolong his war. Negotiating with Putin is useless. He is a liar and a killer. Russia violently invaded a peaceful, sovereign country, an ally of ours, and will not stop unless they are stopped with blunt force trauma. One of our last stops on our trip to Chernihiv was to a village called Lukashivka, a village about 10 miles from the city of Chernihiv. It became another hotspot of violence and death in the early days of the Russian invasion. It was occupied by Russian forces for 21 days in March of 2022. Russian soldiers took over the Church of the Ascension, the heart and center of the village. It was turned into a headquarters and an ammo dump. At the end of March in 2022, when the village was liberated, the Ukrainian soldiers discovered the grim remains of civilians and soldiers who had been tortured and killed there on the church grounds against the side of the church in what became known as the shooting wall. In time, the battered church became a center for the village once again, as it became a hub for locals, volunteers, and supporters, where donations from all over the world began to flow in for the survivors of the Battle of Lukashivka. In the years since the war began, Easter once again is celebrated on the church grounds. Memorials are being held for the brave who died there. Entire generations of the people of Lukashivka have united in the Church of the Ascension. For centuries, the residents have prayed there with family and friends. They've had their children baptized there. They exchanged vows there, celebrated together, and mourned together. They've prayed for strength and comfort there. Maybe someday the Church of the Ascension will be rebuilt in Lukashivka. Perhaps once again its people will be able to gather there in the church that meant so much to them. But for now, as they mourn their dead, they pray for a return of those innocent days before February 24, 2022, of what once was before the Russians invaded. On our trip to Chernihiv, we saw the effects of the Russian invasion, the damage and the destruction. But more importantly, we saw the faces and met the people who had survived. We saw in their eyes the pain and the suffering, but we also saw more of the determination, the perseverance, and the courage and the strength they had. Like the couple whose home and farm had been destroyed, yet they still worked the fields littered with unexploded bombs and mines. They live in a tent now, but they will endure. Or this woman, telling us how the Russians took over her house, how cruel and abusive they were. She would not roll over or appease the invaders. And then there were these ladies of a small village who still smiled and joked and laughed with us. somehow finding joy in just being together and being with us for a while. This lady wanted me to see her flowers that she was so proud of, growing in the shadow of her destroyed home. She told me in Ukrainian, Revelations chapter 21, verse 5, "See, I make all things new." This lady's hand had been burned when she tried to put out a fire one of the Russian bombs had started in her home. Her husband paced nervously by as Nellie, a pharmacist in our group, took care of her. There was this man who lived alone who just wanted to talk, laughed and smiled, even though he'd lost everything. And the lady down the road, who also lived alone, with barely a house to live in. We wanted so bad to be the matchmaker for these two. Maybe in time they'll find each other. The many people and survivors we met were tired, wounded but not defeated, and yet 3 years later, the war continues. I want to thank Tamara, Alexander, Max, and their friends for allowing me to come along with them and to be a small part of their ongoing fight against the Russian invasion, and their incredible support for the beautiful people of Ukraine. I owe them so much. If you would like to help me in my efforts to help support the people and soldiers of Ukraine, please email me at jkirby1@me.com or scan this QR code. And never forget, Slava Ukraini, Heroam Slava. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes.